Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. I'm Taz, and I'm here with my mate, DeadDuck, and we're around the campfire trying to get it all sorted out. Duck and I discuss men's issues, our challenges, our hopes for the future of men and boys, and occasionally our own blind spots. So pull up a stump and join us. And today, for our introductory podcast, we have a special guest, a student, a young lady named Katrina, as you can see. And what we're going to be talking about today, at least to begin with, is mental health. So, Ded and Katrina, you guys go ahead and take it away.
Right, men's mental health. Oh, how we do this one? I guess the biggest thing in the first place to start is men not believing they have a place to speak out and to have their mental health dealt with. I don't believe that the system of mental health intervention that is out there, mental health support, is adequate. I don't think, to be honest with you, counseling works for a lot of men. There are outliers. There are men that find normal talk therapy very therapeutic. But I think an individual response to mental health needs to be put in place that can be used for men as a larger group. What do you think, Katrina?
I believe you're right. Just from looking around, it seems that I'm gonna get a little historical here probably, but generally mental health isn't a much talked about issue, and it's really only become more present due to younger generations and it becoming an issue that's been rising within popularity. And a big part of that is people finally noticing the numbers of like suicides, of people who are depressed and starting to realize the sign of things. And for men, it's a bit harder because they've been stigmatized for a long time that they shouldn't really show certain emotions and that they shouldn't be, well, over emotional, or that they need to be stoic and stoic to a point that it becomes unhealthy. And when it comes to mental health resources they have, there's not many for them.
Yeah.
Mental health resources also are currently, as you brought up, limited. A lot of it is to do with therapy or talking on a couch, and that doesn't really work because men are wired differently when it comes to how they deal with things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the mental health world right now is wiring their approaches, but on the feminine ways of dealing with stuff. And that's only really useful to more feminine people.
Yeah.
More masculine people need more masculine ways or activities of getting through their issues.
Yeah, they do, and all of that puts what it does is it puts the people charged with providing that help in a bind because you're already working with a system that underpays and under resources the therapist even to address well, let's call it less critical mental health issues, specifically, for women, because what you're talking about is, like I say, this underpaid and overworked and under-resourced therapist or, clinical psychologist to handle everybody, under the conditions of sitting on a couch and looking at each other face to face and just talking, or, which is the bulk of my, failed mental health support is, do you guys remember what it was like sitting in 8th grade English class and just what it was like? Because that's what it's like in a lot of what they call, like intensive outpatient treatment for addiction, and definitely inpatient treatment for addiction. I'm not kidding. I would be there and I would be thinking, wow, I any minute now expect them to, break out a whiteboard and have us diagram a sentence, because it's just the same vibe. And, some of the people in the rooms with me, under those conditions, I mean, they were and I was too. You know, I mean, we were heavy hitters. We did not have small problems,
Yeah.
right? We had big problems that, you know, I'm willing to wager that at least a fair percentage of the men, you know, had trauma issues, you know, that were unaddressed in that treatment and would continue to be unaddressed indefinitely, you know, and some small percentage of them, you know, would end up becoming so bound and invested in you know, 12-step programs that they would quit drinking or using drugs, you know, which that's, you know, from a certain point of view, that was the whole point, right? And I was that guy, right? You know, I mean, before everything fell apart on me, you know, I was entirely abstinent, sober, clean for almost 11 years, you know, but you know, and in that recovery, you know, they have the old trope of the bowling ball in a boxcar, right? You know, you clear out a boxcar, but you leave behind one bowling ball, you know, that's just rolling around in there. It does all kinds of damage, right? But you know, people will ignore that bowling ball, right? And the therapeutic and addiction treatment and you know, treatment for other disorders has to come in to try to, you know, to try to treat very large numbers of people, out of which they go in expecting, unfortunately, just a small number, you know, to be able to make it stick, right? I mean, they assume that 12%, you know, is an acceptable statistic for recovery. You know, I mean, us sitting here, we know it's not. You know, I mean, that means 88% are just going to be back in a few months or a couple of years. You know, and it becomes just a spin dry. Where, and by the way, that's the way things were. You know, in the early days before 12-step programs, was it was just assumed that, you know, someone who was an alcoholic or a drug addict, if they had the money and resources, would just continue to, you know, to cycle with addiction and like I say, being spun dry, which is kind of horrifying, but that's the way it was, you know. And you know, for the rest of it, for the underlying, you know, root causes, and Deb, we were touching on this a little bit, you know, before we got started, that, you know, the fact of the matter is that you know, some people's neurobiology makes really getting well really intractable. You know, whether you're just born that way or whether, you know, as in my case, it was due to, you know, these really, at least at the time, people thought these were really extraordinary and probably, for lack of a better word, dire disruptions of my development. You know, the shorthand is trauma. You know, but that's, you know, end of the day, that's what it is. It's something unusual and bad enough that it can never be put in its place. You know, it can never be put in the past for, you know, for me to move on after. And so it's just there, you know. And I'll say, you know, under those conditions, yeah, I drank like a fish, you know. But getting past it, you know, and being able to put all that in its place so I can move on, even for me, you know, is expensive and time consuming, requires a lot of effort. And you know, in my case, it took me, I'll be honest with you, doing a lot of damage to myself and people around me, you know. But when the discussion comes up, you know, among the professionals and the people that are, you know, kind of happy with the status quo, you know, they will talk about the expense of things like men's sheds and equine therapy and you know, other kinds of male oriented healing, because we cost a lot of money. You know, when we're allowed to get that bad, we're expensive, you know. Even putting us in cages is an enormous expense, you know? But like I said, you know, you have to convince those same kind of people that treating us and allowing us to heal properly and permanently is less expensive than what we have now. I mean, if the spin dry method worked the first time for, a lot more than 12% of us, then I wouldn't say a word. I would say, yeah, that's can't do better than that, but the fact is, I mean, like I say, think of a thoracic surgeon or a brain surgeon whose track record is 12% recovery. That would not be good,
Wouldn't be a
and
surgeon for very long, would
they'd be out of work in a while, because it'd be like, hey, I cure 12% of my brain surgery patients. What about the other 88%? Well,
Yeah.
that's not, I'll wait for the next guy, But
Yeah.
anyway, like I said, these things, they all tie together, and having a hard discussion with, well, the professionals, and the other people who are suddenly, very concerned about men's mental health, makes it really easy, to point to somebody like myself, and say, look, this can work, right? And for me, it's a constant uphill battle to, reply with, it worked for me just by happenstance. I am not the model. I can't be the model, but because if you used me as the model, then everybody to follow in my footsteps would have to crater their whole life, just to get started. And most of them wouldn't survive anyway. I mean, they don't even know exactly how I survived, but I shouldn't have. That's the way it worked out. And it's like, if this is serious enough and it's widespread enough that you want to use a better methodology and a better strategy and a better model than just taking one guy who got lucky, and found a place to land where he could get put back together. It's just, that's never a good idea. And the science would never allow for that. You never use the exception to make the rules. It's a bad idea.
Yeah. And there's lots of things going through my head there at the moment. One is this: the whole mental health intervention sounds a bit like learning to drive. You don't actually learn to drive. That happens once you pass a test.
Right.
And another thing is, it's treating the symptoms, not the cause. So the symptom being, in your instance, Taz, the alcoholism,
right?
Rather, what's causing you to be an alcoholic?
Yeah, that's the irony, because in treatment and in recovery, 12-step recovery programs, we make sure everybody remembers that the drinking is but a symptom. I mean, that's in our originating literature. The main problem originates in our mind, and in our emotion, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
It's just that some mental and emotional problems are a lot easier to tackle than others, and I mean, it's like, even for the ones that aren't that difficult, right? Some people will go off the rails a different way than just being a drunk or a drug addict. They'll they'll fetishize work or accomplishment, or sex, or even stuff like gambling. There are a lot of, like, really destructive coping mechanisms to satisfy even, like I said, not very difficult past events. But for someone like me, I was a really bad drunk. I just was. And that's the way it worked out, and whatever. But in the course of trying to get better, I was always willing, right? I was always ready to do what was put in front of me to do, to stop being that, because I hated it, right? I was never a fun drunk, and I didn't go through a period of being just a social drinker. I drank
Mm.
alcoholically from day one. I thought I had found the answer to all life's problems, and for way too long, it was the answer.
Yeah.
It's just that, one day it just don't work anymore. And
Yeah.
then, if it's bad enough, then just getting out of here becomes more appealing than continuing to drink or trying again, to get well. Because
Yeah.
this is after 8, 10, 12 attempt. And then you just think, everybody's gone. I don't need to be here. I can just jump under a train.
Yeah.
And it's like I was right. But for tens and hundreds of thousands of men like me, that's not an answer.
No.
It just isn't. It's just a bad idea. So
Mm.
you kind of have to start from that point, and this is what most of the time I do. I start from the point of saying, we can't keep going the way we're going. It's not going to work. And now that, the rubber is meeting the road, if you think the pile of corpses is bad now, just wait,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and everything, the only thing worse than, all of those men killing themselves is everything that's going to happen to them and the people around them before they die. And that's just a
Well,
fact.
If you're lucky, they'll just take themselves out. If you're lucky.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Not.
I know it doesn't happen that often though. I mean,
No.
sometimes, yeah, it'll be a real ghost and their passing won't be noticed that much.
Mm.
But now we're into, mainstream, like engaged society. And, when they start going, then yeah, it's gonna cause a lot of damage on the way.
Yeah, I've heard of some horrific stories of men with severe mental health issues deciding to take themselves out. Unfortunately, they've also taken other people out with them.
Right.
Mhm.
The German wings disaster is a classic example. If anybody knows about that,
Yeah, that's a good
Mhm.
example, and kind of points to the idea that this has been brewing for a long time.
yeah,
Mhm.
it,
And it's not even just take other people out with them literally, emotionally as well.
oh yeah,
They end up dragging people down with them emotionally. And so now you went from one person with issues who's killing themselves to one person who brought 5 more people in who
Yeah.
now all have issues and
Yeah.
are thinking of killing themselves.
Yeah, and that was me. I tell people that, part of my road to recovery, for whatever it's worth, is, my methodology was to get people to like me and care about me and invest in me and believe in me. And then I would just burn my life to the ground while they watch. To tell you one thing about that, for all the bad things that especially men with mental issues can do, being violent or being thoughtless or being, whatever. Most of them guys, if they really get well and they really stick to it, they're forgiven. But I want to tell you that, if you do that to yourself after getting other people to care about you, they never forgive them. Those people that I did that to, they'll never be part of my life again, no matter what.
The question is, what do we do about it? That's the real thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
Mhm.
A
we can
big
talk about men's suicide till the cows come home, essentially.
right.
Men's mental health issues, but question is, how do we fix this?
Yeah. Now we do what?
Yeah.
We've come to realize this is really bad. So now we do what? And before or earlier this morning, I was in a men's mental health group focusing on childhood sexual trauma because that's my thing. That's how I got here. And the thing is that, at least what I propose, to do about it ain't going to be cheap. It's just not. It's going to be really expensive and it's going to be really resource heavy, and it's going to like bankrupt insurance company. But my position is it's either that or we all go down.
Yeah.
And like sometimes when I talk that way, people are like, that's too much. And I'm like, this is a question of the available options. And when nobody cared about this, and when no one was paying attention, you know, at those times we had some options, right? You know, and we could have gotten, you know, intervention that would not have been so drastic. But that time is over now, you know. I was telling people in that group that, you know, they were talking, or the facilitator was talking about introducing another kind of younger fella into the group, you know, but it was couched in these terms of, is that okay with everybody here? And also, you know, with an eye toward, is he going to be okay with it? Because he's got a lot of anxiety and a lot of hypervigilance, you know, which is really common among us. And he has a lot of stuff that really keeps men away from that kind of therapy. And even at that, guys, you know, it's predicated on the idea that he can heal the same way I do, which that's just, you know, as rare, as scarce as hen's teeth. Most men don't heal the way we do. They just don't, you know. But the other things where, you know, where they really can heal, and Dead, you brought this up a number of times, you know, even something as straightforward looking as a men's shed, that is exclusively for men, you know. And you know, some of our colleagues do things like the half the spirit angle, you know, but I mean, there are a lot of them, but like I said, they're not cheap. And right now, you know, the public policy, you know, across the West, and the insurance industry, you know, I mean, they just won't consider, you know, what's in front of them because it's too much money, you know.
Yeah, I see.
Because it is, you know.
I come
And
the money thing from a different angle, being in a quote unquote socialist country, because it's the government that provides the healthcare. It should, technically speaking, be, well, you know, it's done through taxation. The money comes from taxation, so it should really be money, no object. It isn't, admittedly, but you know, a lot of these organizations, such as Med Sheds, are actually charities. So it's elective as to whether or not you want to go.
right,
But the proof is in the pudding.
yeah,
They work at the end of the day, and this is the thing for me. It really, really is. They could have brought that young man into your group, Taz, and it would be, he might come along for a few weeks. He might start to trust you and the other people within the group, but he's just not getting anywhere. He might speak occasionally. He might tell you what happened to him, but it won't be with the idea that he's getting better.
right, yeah. All too often, that's exactly how it worked.
You know, he's not getting anything from these sessions in terms of improving. It's just he's there.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to say this, right. I think you should bring him in, and
I do too. I was like, yeah, you know, bring him.
Try and find out about him. Find out how, you know, try and get an idea of how he ticks, and hopefully in time he might give you some information that you can turn around and say to him, right, look, you being here isn't going to work in the long term. Keep coming to the group, but we need to find you another way, because there is another way of doing this.
And to be able to say with some confidence that other way is available.
Yeah.
Katrina, I'm sorry. I think you were about to say something.
Oh, well, I was just going to sort of add on to Dead's point that, you know, when it comes to what's the solution, what's not, and you were talking about the government, well, at least where you're at, it's the insurance is covered by them. I think the issue with, I mean, charities is you have to sort of look around for these charities. You know, it's not, they don't make themselves, they try to make themselves present, but they're still not as present. But if you were to put them as a resource provided by the government in your case, the problem would be is they'd have to follow the government's guideline for mental health. And right now, the government's guideline for mental health is very uninformed, or it's informed by data that is, well, let's just say it's analyzed, but it's analyzed in a way where it's so specific that it's leaving out things that are quite important, which causes this issue of having limited ways of taking care of things. I think it has to be down to a point. There's some ideal way, and the reality is there isn't.
Yeah, you know, the one, like the upside of all this is that for men, you know, there are a lot of options, right? You know, for getting like a lot of different ways that we can heal, you know, that there are. And they're, like I say, they're costly and difficult. And right now they would be operating in an environment that makes it very difficult for men to be willing to get started without catastrophe. In other words, to encourage them, to seek out whatever kind of help works before everything falls apart. Because even in, again, I point back to the recovery community, everybody comes in with the understanding that before, you can recover, you have to hit bottom, and so the trick they came up with was to raise the bottom, right? Now, that's a very short-term solution to a very long-term problem, so that now, the raising of the bottom was just a matter of really intensifying the consequences of continued addiction, the legal consequences and employment consequences. And
That's no good.
and well, like I said, this is what they came up with because it's cheap, or at least it was at the time, right? And they are now finding out that it's a horror show, b, it ruins, like vast numbers of families and relationships. It's way more expensive than anything I'm proposing, and frankly, it just doesn't work. It sends men who start out, ill and debilitated, and at best turns them into ciphers. I mean, people that are just really disengaged from the kind of person that they might be, and at worst it turns us into monsters. Yeah, I mean, it makes us from the mentally and emotionally disabled and ill into, like I said, just the worst kind of people, right? Dangerous and cunning and experienced. It's one thing to have somebody, just be kind of a sick person that does bad things, and it's something else, to weaponize it and turn that same person, into a skilled, this is the language I'm using. They are skilled and cunning and experienced, criminal or bad actor, right? Because this is what happened. And I'm like, if you want more of that, keep doing what you're doing. If you want something else, it's going to cost you.
Yeah. You might as well tack the funeral directors on the back of the counsellor's room at that point in time.
Pretty much.
That's the best outcome. Is there's going to be bodies.
Yeah.
Whose bodies they're going to be, I can't say, but there are going to be bodies.
Yeah. A lot of the people in my previous life, who ended up being hurt by me, to keep it on me, they were innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. Right. And when, like, my former wife, she reached out for help because she knew how sick I was, right? It was very obvious. And the solution was, throw him out, divorce him, keep the stuff, and it's like, if that's the best you can do, then you can just assume this is going to get worse, because it will.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen or heard of a television show called The Jeremy Kyle Show?
Yeah.
No.
It was a daytime talk show type effort. Think Maury Povich,
right?
And you'll get an idea. And the one I always remember was a former British soldier who was fucked. There's no other way about it. He was gone, and you looked in his eyes and you could see the fear. And his wife was talking about leaving him, and I just thought, what good is going to come if the only person he trusts and feels comfortable with walks out the door? Best you can hope for then is he takes himself and himself alone. The chances are it's not going to end that way.
And that's a sad reality of a lot of soldiers.
It's
that they go.
It's not just soldiers though. It's a sad reality for a lot of men.
It's me. I mean, what you described is exactly how it played out for me. Before the end, the only person, that I was still able to have some trust in, and some connection to, was my wife. And really, I mean, they made it very clear to her that the solution to this problem is to exile him,
Mm.
and I'm like, I could, if I was different a little bit, I could have really become a monster from that. I
Mm.
could have gone from being like a nuisance, I guess, and a problem to being, a real danger, right?
Mm.
And I mean, I'm glad I didn't and everything and what have you. And I'm also glad I didn't successfully kill myself. Point is, I look at that and think, for every one of me, right? How many are there that, just end up becoming a danger, to everyone, right?
Mm.
It's like some people are a danger to everyone, and that's unavoidable. That's a tiny little microscopic
Yeah.
portion of the total. But it's like, they're specifically manufacturing more.
Mm.
I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me. It just doesn't.
It's a dangerous game of dice to be playing,
Mm.
Mhm.
especially when you weight the dice towards snake eyes. You all know what that means.
Yep, yep. Again, taking the broader view of all of this, I complain and decry what we're doing now, but I never forget that what I see and what many see as the real solution is going to be hard, and way back, 20, 30 years ago or whatever, I think it would not have been so hard.
Mm.
I think it would have been a little smoother transition, but we didn't do it.
Mm.
The social and political and economic structure stuck to its gun. So now we have this, right? And this is not good. And soon it will become unlivable
Mm.
for anybody. And I'm like, well, what that means is, if we can pull this off, and if we can, avoid like driving off the cliff, everybody's going to have to roll up their sleeves, even if they really don't want to, and even if they've been hurt before, right? Like, especially if they've been hurt before, and everybody's going to have to pitch in, and somebody is going to have to pick up the check, right?
Mm.
Because this thing, like I said, it's just not going to be cheap. And that sucks because, people like me already represent a big enough cost. I mean, throughout my life and throughout my disability, I was expensive. And I tell people, even the kind of treatment that I took, I could have bought a real nice house with that, right? And it would have still been a bargain if it would have worked, but now I don't have a house, and up until past 6 years or so, it didn't work.
Mm.
So like I said, I don't want people listening to this, and I don't want people that I talk to get the idea that, that any of this is going to be easy, or that it's going to happen by Thursday, or that, we're still going to we're still going to not have to learn how to live without things that we've gotten used to. One thing about, and I tell this to people in the community all the time, I said, one thing about really addressing the mental health and well-being of men and boys means that we are going to have to relieve them of some of the expectations that we have always had on men and boys, at least for a while. And when I say a while, I'm talking about generations.
Mm.
That this is something that, that men who are who are falling short, which is most of us now. We're so afraid and so skeptical and so despairing of our place in the world that anyone expecting us, to just shake it off and rub some dirt on it and get back in harness is kidding themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is gonna hurt, guys. It's gonna mean, like empty grocery shelves and, gas stations with signs that say out of gas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I know, Duck, you've got a like soft spot in your heart for, for military culture and military technical,
Mm.
modern advance. But I mean, that's right now in America, that's where most of the money goes. And, that's going to have to be a sacrifice too,
I
which
don't
is
disagree. I don't disagree with you there.
which is, I mean, between you and me, that's a little terrifying because we painted ourselves into this corner of always having to be, so far in advance of any other military that, like I say, that's where most of the money goes.
Mm.
And to pull back from that means that we're not going to be that far ahead, and we're going to have to like realign and re-strategize what's left because it's not going to be that much. And it's not going to be for one election cycle. It's going to be for decades. So people listening to this and people that I talk to, I want them to know that, this is going to hurt. It's going to cost a lot of sacrifice, a lot of money, and a lot of deprivation, and it's nobody's fault because it's everybody's fault. Say 20, 30, 40 years ago, what I'm talking about would not have been necessary to make this right, but as I said before, I believe in tipping points and we're past that one. It's going to be something we're going to have to look back on and say, our culture and our society's made a mistake there and here's what it cost.
How much do you guys think, obviously, because we're all involved with the men's movement and what have you, and we're critical of feminism to a certain degree, or scathingly so. But how much do you think pervasive feminist narratives, particularly around things like toxic masculinity, have played their part? And do you think it's accelerated the damage? Do you think it has in some way been beneficial to have those conversations?
Go ahead, Katrina.
It's really sort of done both. In a sense, the issue with the term toxic masculinity is the fact that it does bring up the issue that there are some factors that correlate, but are not directly part of masculinity, sometimes correlate that are symptoms of something greater. But it's also an issue because it's become such a fluid term that people are now starting to make it seem, especially toxic feminists, that almost all masculinity is toxic, quote unquote. That all masculinity is a problem, and that's not exactly true. And so, in a way, we're starting to over feminize culture and talking in the world of mental health. The world of mental health, especially, most of it is feminized, as we were talking about earlier. There's no masculine part to it. So it's brought up the conversation that, yes, there are toxic things that correlate with masculinity that need to be spoken about, but it's not taking care of them properly because at the same time, the same narrative is run over by more toxic, feminized believers that, oh, well, maybe masculinity is the problem, and it's not. So it's bringing up, these groups that do talk about the issues of they do make some accurate points on some of these issues of the things that correlate. But the problem is instead of saying that they correlate sometimes, they're saying, no, straight up, the cause is masculinity, which isn't the case at all. Masculinity isn't the problem. It's the fact that masculinity has been, for the longest time, something that people haven't really, they're talking about how this is going to be hard. People like taking the easy way. And the easy way means that they do not go into depth about what masculinity is, what it isn't, how to address masculine issues. And that is something they will have to do to fix this mental health crisis. They have to admit there are feminine ways, there are masculine ways. What are they? There have been so many studies into the feminine. There have been so many stories and, as we know, procedures written for the feminine, but nothing for the masculine. Because that would have to be a whole discovery path. They'd have to take that currently, in all honesty, does not have much back research because no one has done it before. And so they'd have to open a whole new can of worms, metaphorically.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, the proposal, and again, this all originated from from the academies and the think tanks that examine things like gender issues and mental and emotional well-being. And they said, they looked at much of what men and boys are like now. And, they said, well, this is poisonous, it's toxic, it's an unnatural and dangerous performance that men and boys are being jammed into. Now, like I said, and the result is that they're distrustful and exploitative of the people around them, most especially women. But just as important, it lands them in a lot of trouble and very often kills them. And of course the effect on the man or boy who, from their perspective, is being toxic, the effect on them is played down. It's not made the whole point of the exercise. The whole point of the exercise is, to, as you say, Katrina, kind of feminize them in order to fit the narrative and protect, the others that they were harming from harm, and to continue empowering, like I said, that very one-sided perspective. And it started out that bad, toxic masculinity. It started out that bad, and it just got worse from there. So that now, anyone around those other campfires that I talk to about it that's in the know, I'll be the one bringing up toxic masculinity, and you can just see in their face, the dismay and rejecting the idea, because they have. One of my therapists and I talked about it, and she just said, "Yeah, that's a doomed methodology. It's corrupted beyond reclamation. There's nothing anyone can do about it. Give up. Don't enact." Her position is, she does not enact addressing toxic masculinity with any of her male clients. This
I
doesn't
hate
work.
to be rude, but your therapist, not
She
many
does-
therapists admit to that.
no, she does very well. She's kind of but she came up, in her career kind of the hard way, and long after addressing, her own personal issues, she, just like us, looked around and discovered that, yeah, what they taught me at school and what they're encouraging and all this, it's not working, or at least not working very much. And so she just kind of does it her own way, and she will just look at me and tell me the truth. But like I said, the fact is that for most guys, just being able to do that with somebody that's, fresh out of the hospital, or, just failed to overdose or whatever, they wouldn't even know what to do with that, right? Because they're like, well, so I'm not toxic, but what the hell is wrong with me? And I was able, to take that as given and be able to get well. But, like I said, that for most men, like Dead, your experience with the struggles you've been through, I mean, some things worked and some things didn't, right? And we all like get grouchy about the ones that didn't, because they're not cheap either, and they take a long time, and they make you vulnerable just by basically saying, I'm a little messed up. Right, which people, Katrina, I know you know this, but for the listeners, you can trust me. That's, people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear, a man who is part of their community and part of their life just look at them and say, I'm falling apart and I don't know what to do. They don't like it. And then from there, Dead, like you were saying, somebody has to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Somebody has to come up with a method that's going to get that man or even boy from where they are to where they need to be. And none of it is cheap. None of it is low effort. But accusing us of being toxic, that don't cost anything. That's a freebie. The point is, though, that it does not work. It never did. And now that phrase has been let loose in the culture everywhere, not only is it useless, it's dangerous. It causes damage that was not there before, right? And it's there now, and there again, there's another, problem to address, somebody's going to have to come up with a plan. You know, how do we get people out of spurious and clumsy and uninformed accusations of toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
You know, that turns it around to the people who are not men, you know, to say either A, you will stop doing this, you know, and engage with us directly in order to help us fix this, or B, you're going to keep doing what you're doing until the wheels come off, you know, and those are your options. Pick one.
Yeah.
You know,
I've asked the question before now, how much blood is enough? How many bodies are too many?
One of the people that, you know, that I am very good friends with, but this person's not a caregiver at all, just a friend, you know, but because she is a feminist and she is sick to death of what has become of feminism. She also says, like I said, that, you know, toxic masculinity is a meaningless and dangerous phrase. But, you know, she'll remind me that, the mental and emotional well-being of women is quickly declining as well. And I said, yeah, you know, that scares me just as much as this does, because with that, you know, I think if their mental health issues go as far as ours do, we're not going to come back from that. You know?
No,
because with men, you know, there's that final backstop, put them in a cage, right? You know, but what I asked her, I've asked other women this, what are they going to do when you get as sick as we are? You know, they're going to round you up, put you in cages. Is that what that's not going to happen. You're just going to, your misery and, you know, your debility is going to become part of the wallpaper. You know, it's just going to be there. I'm like, so now what? You know,
I think the problem there too is empowerment and the usage of that word. You know, it at one point meant being a very confident person, believing in yourself, being very you. But it's so abused nowadays. You will see so many people use the word empowerment, and it will be some of the most toxic women, and they think their behavior is empowerment. And so now that's what we believe empowerment to be.
Right.
And, you know, you're talking about what do we do at the low point? Well, that's what we're doing. We're saying, oh, you're not at a low point. You're just totally empowered.
Yeah.
So we're not even addressing the issue. We're putting a little bow on it and saying, no, look, it's a present on a rock.
Part of that,
It's
I
weighing
think,
us down.
is women haven't been taught the difference between being independent in inverted commas and being self-reliant.
Yeah.
And that's all down to attitude.
Yeah.
My partner is very, very self-reliant. She can look after herself, no problems at all. I don't think you'll ever hear her say that she's an independent woman.
Right.
Yeah.
The self-reliance, you know, doesn't put all that empowerment into a zero-sum game. But once you focus on independence at the expense of how I would say it, that interdependence, you know, like I say, then like Katrina, you would have to go through the rest of your life defending your empowerment with the understanding that if you give it up, you know, you're going to lose, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, then no matter, like, everything will be focused onto, you know, holding on to yours. And again, it'll be because it's at the expense of everyone else, you know. And the women I see, you know, who are the most egregious examples of that, I can look in their face and I can tell, I know you're like desperate to hold on to something that you think is going to be taken from you if you get off of that, you know, girl boss, like pop feminist position, that you believe down to your toes that if you don't act this way, they're going to come and take it from you, you know. And like I said, you know, the alternative is facing that possibility and saying, you know, I'm going to be interdependent anyway. You know, I'll be self-reliant and I'll be, you know, I'll put on my grown-up pants and everything and handle my own, but I'm not going to do it at anybody else's expense. And I'm not going to do it just, defending and protecting what's mine. If I lose it, I lose it, and Dad, I'm sure you'll agree, but men face that kind of choice all the time,
Mm-hmm.
where we're faced with either holding on to what we believe is important, by defending it and by putting everybody else off, right? Or letting it go and saying, maybe I don't need to hold on to this. And if I lose it, I know I can, live without it. Because then you become fearless, and then you become aware of how broad the problem is. Everybody that I talk to, about all this, that that can see reason, they all have that awareness. They understand, yeah, this might not work.
Mhm.
The therapist that I spend time with, and the cuddle therapist that I'm with, they go into it knowing, this whole thing might crater on us anyway, but we can't keep doing what we're doing, because if we do, then for sure it'll crater on us.
Mhm.
Those are bad choices.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we have, either maybe it'll all go to hell, or for sure,
Mm.
that sucks, man. I didn't grow up thinking it was going to be like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hey, I just want to address Katrina for a second, because obviously I know you're in a happy long-term relationship and what have you. Do you
Yeah.
think, would you say you're self-reliant?
Um,
You could get by
I
on your own,
I wouldn't say so.
but you certainly wouldn't call yourself an independent woman, certainly not
No.
in the modern sense.
No, definitely not. I can I take care of myself? Yes, but I still need, that connection, any conversation, I need people to be around.
And obviously, you've got your fella and what have you. I'm not assuming you're with him for the hell of it. He obviously brings something to the table, as it were. No, I would assume that would be the ability to look after you in the ways that you can't look after yourself, or that you're not as capable of looking after yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the problem with like the modern independent woman is the problem with the modern independent woman, toxic women, is the fact that they sit here and they're like, oh, I'm so independent, I'm taking care of myself, I'm making moves, I'm going up. And they forget in all of that there's still a need for companionship. There's a need for a second voice, a need for someone to contradict you
Mm,
and everything in life. You need someone who's going to sit there and tell you, hey, you're pushing yourself too hard. Take a break.
mm.
Because if not, you're not going to stop. And then you're going to push yourself so hard that you end up hurting yourself more.
Yeah, which is something I've got now with my current partner.
Yeah. You need someone to tell you what's okay and what's not, because you can determine that on your own, yes. But when you are doing it alone, you become radical in a way because it's only your opinion you're hearing
Mm.
and you need more than one.
Yeah, I had a very, very funny conversation. Well, I say funny, it got very, very nasty. Conversation with a girl I went to school with. Now, she is what, 38, 39, a bit younger than me. And she was talking about wanting to get married. This was only less than a year ago. And she wants to get married and do all this stuff. And I said, you're going to find it damn near impossible, because yes, all right, you've raised your son, what have you, and he's this, that, and he's something else besides. And she'd posted stuff about him being disrespectful to her and being and what have you. And then I said, how long have you been on your own? I can't remember, it's donkey's years. And I said, and you're going to let a man come into your life and then have him point out things to you, or he's going to come into your life and you're going to be, oh, you're doing that wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. You're not doing this because he's not doing things your way. And then what you end up with is either a guy who can't be bothered, so walks, or a guy who is so beaten down that he doesn't contribute anything of value to the relationship. And so you're left disappointed as a woman as to the quality of man that you're getting. And then you come up with this, or you buy into this mantra of men ain't shit and all this rubbish. So, and she didn't like that conversation.
No. And to be honest with you, I don't blame her for not liking it. I don't I'm not comfortable with having to admit that, that's the kind of man that I ended up being.
Mm.
Right. The one that was just so so down hard that I couldn't contribute anything anymore. But this takes me back to, like I said, there are some sacrifices that are going to need to be made to fix all this, and one of them is say being willing and able to admit that this is it's not normal, right? It's not healthy, and it's not sustainable. That was one of the reasons I asked Katrina to join us, because on the one hand, Katrina, you're a woman who's interested and concerned about men's issues, but you don't present yourself as being outraged or furious about it. You're just like, yeah, this is messed up, and it doesn't have to be. And I don't blame you for taking that position, because you just got here, right? I mean, you started adulthood a minute ago from our perspective, and that means there's this long walk ahead of you, like long, and things are going to happen, and you're going to be called upon, like to have resources in difficult situations, right? And like I say, the failure of a lot of the women who frustrate you so much is, like I said, they're being directed and coerced into forgetting all that, and not caring about it, just so that they can have the promise of like I say, like just a Disney princess girl boss life, and I get it. I mean, I'd like a Disney princess girl boss life, but it's a fugazi. It doesn't exist, right? It's running towards something that's not there, and the fact, like I said, that you get that puts you in a very privileged class. It puts you in the class of younger women that know what's going on and just elect to do something about it. Again, for as much for your own sake as anyone else's, because you're right. A future that is untended by by people who can work with each other is going to be the kind of world where nobody can work with each other. That's that ability to cooperate, and work together and be that laundry list that I always talk about: compassionate, forgiving, forbearing, honest, humble, honorable, loyal. All those things will be dim memory, right?
Yeah.
And I will not be stuck in that world, but you will. And yeah, you're right. You have, like myself and DeadDuck, we've got a certain amount of stake in it. Me least of all, I suppose. But yeah, you are neck deep in it. And like I said, it's something to get angry about and be outraged about for about a minute. Then something has to be done. And the unfortunate truth is, like I say, these young men who are so despondent and discouraged, very difficult to get them, to be as active as DeadDuck and I are. Not because they can't, it's just because they're cut off at every turn. Another young man that one of my cuddle therapists asked me about, that I might be interested in mentoring. Of course, I said yes, but he got to be willing to go along with it too. And right as of this moment, he's not sure. And I don't blame him. I'm a total stranger, and I'm liable to tell him anything. I mean, what happens if I just go all Andrew Tate on him, and tell him to put on a mask and a costume and wave a cigar around, and then he'll get laid? Most young men don't want that, because they'll never be able to keep it up, and the ones that are, fooled into thinking they can are headed off a cliff. Of everybody, the ones that I feel the worst for are young men like that, because life is going to be an unending nightmare for them if they don't back away from it.
Yeah. And another issue, like, too, I think that makes it hard for men is just not having, I guess, the resources to know about their issue, which is, and I'm just taking this off of like personal experience, so I could be completely wrong, but it just seems like when I talk to guys, they know that something is up. Sometimes they know that there's something wrong with themselves or with the world, and it never really clicked to them before. And then when it does click, they're unsure of what to do next.
I think we're all unsure of what to do next.
It's like this limbo that they're in for a while. And this actually sort of funnily enough goes into a thing, except I'm learning it in business, which is the idea of data absorption and the fact that you can have so many things put in front of you, but you can't do anything with it unless you know how to analyze it properly. And no one's, there to tell them how to analyze it properly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they just push it aside, and that's one issue. And then the other half of it is the men who do know and do something. And this is where it goes in, Taz, that you were talking about how I'm not enraged. I think I'm also not enraged because I've seen the people who are enraged,
Yeah.
the boys that come in who are affected by this, and they have a right to be angry, but then their anger is so strong, it lashes out into something else that just ends up hurting everything all over again
Right.
and ends up not helping them get help.
Right. It becomes mindless.
Mhm.
And like I said, correspondingly, the growing number of especially young women that are, getting involved in all of this, same problem. They're angry as hell, and like the more mature women that are in the movement, they they're angry too, and with very good reason, because they've just had everything pulled out from under them, which is why they got involved. And like I said, the anger has a place, and the anger, it's like fear and pain. It will get you a certain distance down the road, no question about it. It's like I was saying before, like deprivation. Deprivation is a very powerful motivator, but at some point you have to stop running away from whatever you're running from and at least walk toward something. And that something, like I said, is really expensive. I mean, while you were talking, I was just thinking about even one of my therapists is developing an equine therapy program. It's just a horse, but if you want a horse to do therapy, first thing is you need access to a farm. Mm-hmm. You do, because if it's just a penned or stabled horse, they're very difficult, impossible to train. And this is more training than the average farm horse goes through, a lot more. So you need space, you need time, you need people to be able to take care of the horse while you're doing your other thing. You see where I'm going with this? It's like this and this and this and this. It ain't cheap, and of all the things that we're talking about, that's one of the least expensive alternative therapies, that would appeal to and like get the ball rolling for most men. Men's sheds, like I said, in the telling, it sounds very straightforward and very appealing. It takes money, it takes time, it takes people, it takes mentorship, organization. It's like like starting a business, and if it's going to be a small business, then it's not going to be able to service very many men. And if you're in a community where most of the men are doing okay, that's fine. But what if like 80% of those men are really suffering and the shed can only take on 15? What do the others do, right? See what I mean? It's not just in fact, it's not just the expense, it's the availability, and the availability comes from, like really widespread popular support and popular insistence from the power structure to say, look, we're not, this whole region of the country is going to not vote for you unless you do this for us, and I mean now, at the expense of whatever you got to expend, but it doesn't, like I said, without a catastrophe, it's very difficult to get it to work that way. These things, they're not easy. But
I
you
think
know,
the most expensive thing is actually going to be, it's not a form of therapy,
Yeah.
putting dads back in the home.
yeah, that's a very high cost venture. And
Yeah.
again, you know, the only, because I hear that frequently, you know, is the amount of resources it's going to take out of the system. And I tell them, look, 30, 40 years ago, you know, I'd agree, I guess I would agree with you there, you know, we might need to find another way. That time is over, you know. Now we're down to these two choices: either bite the bullet, make this happen, and bear the cost and learn how to live without things we've gotten used to, or we let the whole thing burn all the way to the ground where nobody has anything.
Mm.
You know? And then, you know, if you expect to be able to come back to somebody like me and say, you know, help us pick up the pieces, I'm going to have to say no.
Yeah.
You know, because I won't be able to help you.
I'd be saying no as well.
Yeah.
I'd be saying, I told you, I warned you this was going to happen. You didn't listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said,
now we can't do anything about it.
right. That's the important thing, you know, and that's the one that I stress. Say, look, you know, after it all goes to hell, I can say anything I want. The point is, it doesn't matter. The point is that I'll be saying it because I won't be able to, I'll be powerless. You know, I'll be useless to you, right? I'm here waiting to be useful to you, you know, like, let's go now.
Yeah.
Because after all of that you're so scared of happens, I'm going to be a ghost. You know, if I'm still around, I am not going to be, you know, capable of doing anything to make it any better.
Yeah. And this is why MGTOW has become this thing. And I know in New Zealand they actually wanted to ban MGTOW as misogynistic.
Yeah.
But MGTOW has got so much power because they've actually now decided the world it's gone too far. We want no part in this. This is going to go to hell, and we're going to watch it burn. And that's an awfully powerful statement for them to be making.
Yeah.
And you know, the more and more men that go MGTOW, the less the rest of us have got available in terms of resources to stop things from going to hell.
Yeah, very often that's what I tell people that like accuse me of being MGTOW. Say, look, I'm still willing to negotiate. You know, I still do believe there's time, not much, but some. And I am willing, you know, to I'm willing to pay those costs that I know are part of getting out of this. You know, but like that is exactly 50% of what's needed. The other 50% is all you. You know? And I'm like, I'm ready to go, you know, and you know how to reach me. But until then, you know, like in our last discussion, we were talking about college. You know, I'm sorry, guys, but I would tell a young man, and I have told young men that, you know, when family, community, social circle, whatever, you know, just demands that you go to college, then, you know, say no problem, ready to go. You know, got my paperwork in order. One small condition, you know, you change the world for me so that it's safe to do so. Until then, I'm a no. You know, and the people who, you know, tell me to reconsider, you know, like stuff like romance and dating and whatnot, same thing. I say, you know, I y'all know where I'm at and how to get a hold of me. It's just that one small thing. You fix this so that I don't go through all that noise again.
Yeah.
If not, then, you know, I'm comfortable. Right.
I wouldn't advise young men to go to college and university. The only reason I'm doing so with my son is because his career cannot be taught any other way. The thing that he wants to do with his life cannot be taught in any other way. And we're lucky that to a certain degree, the UK's upper educational system hasn't gone the same way as America.
Don't send them to America. Don't send them here.
No, he won't be. I'll be sent if he does well in school. He'll be going to one of the two best universities in the world. So two of them are in the UK. But for most guys, I would turn around and say, go to a trade school, go and learn to be a plumber, something along those lines, painter and decorator. Go and learn a skilled trade because they're always going to be needed. Electricians in particular, auto electricians. Go and learn that stuff. And going back to my point about putting fathers back in the homes, we also need to put mentors back in the workplace. I'm lucky, very, very lucky in my working life. I've had male mentors everywhere I've gone, whether that be, when I was 18 years of age in a main dealer for a car company, learning my trade, or whether that be in the last couple of years just as an HGV driver. I've still had male mentors. I still have people show me how to do things.
Mhm.
And one thing for young lads in particular, they get to learn about life from their male elders. That
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
experiences that cannot be gleaned from, and not to be rude, but it can't be gleaned from a woman. End of the day.
Mhm.
I mean, to use myself for an example again, I had that conversation with one of my therapists. I said, at the end of the day, this is a mentorship. You're mentoring me, and I seem to be, making progress based on that. And I'm like, congratulations to me. Who gives a crap? That's useless in the grand scheme of things. It just happened to work out that way for me, but
Mhm.
for almost every other male, I looked at one of my therapists and I said, would you want to set it up where, you're the focal point of these young men's, like social and emotional progress, and of course, she's like, no, that's not my role. And I'm like, you're right, it's not, that's very dangerous. And and I told one of them, I said, you would pay more for that than anyone else. Yeah, it would not work for those young men. It would mess things up for them, but it would devastate you. Imagine going home from work every night knowing for sure that you're sending these young men out into the world ill prepared to do anything. And she's like, no, that's a nightmare. And I'm like, yes, it is. You're right. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I said, yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, I and a few guys like me are this special case that can respond well to what you have to offer. But look what we had to go through to get there.
Yeah.
So like, vast numbers of men in every community having to go through what I went through just to be able to sit here and take direction from you. That we'd run out of time a long time before the first one showed up.
Mhm.
But yet, it's like I said, it's cheaper and apparently for some of them more fun to just say you're toxically masculine, you should be more feminine and go get therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you and I have had conversations, Taz, where I've turned around and said to you that an important place for you would be someone like the Discord server we're all in, because we've got young guys coming through that
Mhm.
desperately need a Taz, desperately.
Maybe I should make a channel, a server on Discord.
We can make you your own channel in our Discord.
All right.
You could.
I'll give it some thought.
Yeah, the reason I say that is there are young guys that are going to be coming through that server who have never had the opportunity, because they haven't had it in their life, speak to an older man about life. I mean,
Mhm.
I get that from from the conversations that you and I have. I am 40 years old. I'm a father of two.
Right.
I've got a failed marriage behind me. I've got more than enough life experience, but I still get value from having conversations with older guys like yourself who have been through different experiences.
Yeah.
But, it's another form of therapy, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, in its way, it's a mentorship and collective therapy of one kind or another. Is, well, for us guys, I'm not going to blame nature or nurture or whatever, but yeah, I mean, like I say to people, especially for guys, we can keep pretty much anything up for a month, and we can roll on with a full head of steam for 4 weeks or whatever. But after that, then it's on us. And then it becomes, you start to look at it like, wow, I'm either going to keep doing this or I'm going to go back to worse than where I was before. And for a man anyway, who, already has all the engagements and responsibilities and everything that men do, to say, yeah, I'm going to do all of that. I'm going to keep doing all of that. And I'm going to continue doing this is a big commitment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I'm going to dedicate at least some part of my life to it now and forevermore.
Yeah. And the other thing is, going on this mentoring line, I'm lucky also that I've been able to be a mentor. So I've had the opportunity to fulfill both roles, and it is fulfilling when you pass on knowledge of something. Gone are the days where, in the days of the tribes and what have you in the West in particular, it still happens in tribes around the world. The men would come in and take the boys away at a certain age,
Right.
and they would take them and do things with them, like hunting, for example.
Yeah.
Because it's a skill that they have to have in order to survive. The old joke of vegan is an ancient term for the village idiot who can't hunt. So, having, for young men in particular, especially now more than ever, they need mentors. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the videos. I can't remember the names of the channel, but there are a couple of channels out there with older guys. Maybe they've got young grandchildren, maybe they haven't, but they're showing basic life skills that every young man should know. How to tie
Oh, yeah. Oh God, I'm trying to talk about it. Isn't it like one of them's called like Dad Help Me, and each episode is a new thing.
Yeah.
One's like how to tie your tie, another one's how to unclog your toilet. And
Yeah. I mean, how much better would some of these young men feel having that? I mean, for crying out loud, Jordan Peterson should never have gotten as big as he has.
Yeah.
He's a university lecturer.
Yeah.
Why has he got so big? Because he's turning around to young men and saying, look, this isn't just on you. You've been put into an impossible position. You can't do this alone. You need help. We need you.
Yeah.
Right. If you fall by the wayside, if you all end up in the literal or figurative hole in the ground, we're screwed.
And it also like is very realistic in a way. And the fact that he also points out, that okay, it sucks, everything's going wrong, it's not completely your fault, but this isn't the way to go about it. Recently he did an interesting video sort of interview with this young lady who's African.
Yes.
And she was talking about the history of like African colonization, pointing out that you can't blame colonization for poverty, and there needs to stop being this emphasis on reparations from the past, because the past is the past. And if you keep going this way, you're not going to get anything done. And Peterson's done that with, pointing that out with some of the men's movement, with other things. That's sort of a general, I guess, memo line he goes with, which is you can go the way you're going, but is it going to get you where you need to be?
Right. And, the good thing about us men who are, struggling with all this and have been, to use their language, under the yoke of the oppression that we have faced is, and I'm sure, Dad, you'll agree with me on this. We're not interested in any reparations for the past.
No.
I mean, that's not like, what would we do with it? It's like whenever, there's some proposed change or, some revolutionary idea, the first thing that always pops into my head is, okay, and then when you get what you want, what then? I mean, some things probably would work out better, and be a little more manageable. But some things cost too much, and some things cost just about enough, and some things don't cost very much at all. And long term, what we're proposing really doesn't cost that much. And I don't mean just money. I mean, in social change and cultural shift, we're pretty low maintenance, and we encourage each other to stay that way, because we understand the long-term consequences of just throwing our toys out of the pram and demanding reparations for the past. It's wasteful and deleterious, and ain't gonna happen. I mean, that's point number one is, we go at it with the understanding that nothing like that is even on the table, but we're okay with it because we know that if it was, we wouldn't want it anyway. We want the future, not the past. And we want converts. We don't want exiles. Right? We want more people with us.
Yeah.
We don't want more people to throw out of the club. But let's face it, between the Discord server and NCFM and all the other stuff, we're pretty tolerant of some stuff, but it's because we're patient and we want true believers. We don't want performers. Because performers, that's the people, the kind of people, Katrina, you were talking about, that they're putting on a show and they're there only for their own reason. They go away because from their perspective, we're a hopeless case, because they're not going to get anything out of it. I come here, I don't expect to get anything out of it. I don't want anything out of it. I just want it different, because this is wrong. You know what? Sorry, guys, but I got to get ready for my night shift. Do we all want to be able to try and do this next week as well?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. Then we will reconvene in a week. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. And hopefully we'll see you again in a week.